Is the market for vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Facing a massive bubble that is about to burst at any moment? Let's talk about this and more right now. So there's increasingly a lot of talk out there about how the market for vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards could be facing some kind of a bubble, if you will, where a lot of people are just all hyped up to buy cards. They aren't really interested in keeping them. They just want to flip them. And that sooner or later, it's all just going to come crashing down. The house of cards will collapse. The cards will be worth nothing but the paper stock and the cardboard upon which they're printed. And everybody's going to lose all this money, right? Is the sentiment that I think people are starting to express, right? And you've seen some evidence of this maybe in some Pokemon retracing, and sports cards has had its ups and downs and things over the years and so on and so forth. So I wanted to just kind of weigh in and give my 2 cents on the extent to which I think we're in the middle of a bubble and what I think it means for collectors or people that are trying to make investments in the trading card space. If you're new to our channel, we do cover a lot of vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! And trading card related topics, so please feel free to like and subscribe and comment if this is the kind of content and the kind of insight that's interesting to you. So let's start off with the basics. Do I think that there's actually a bubble right now in the market for vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Products? The answer is, like most questions in economics, I think it depends on what you're talking about specifically in the market for Yu-Gi-Oh! So what's funny about this market is there's different niches, there's different segments, there's different things that are being sold, right, and traded out there in the market. You have a lot of people and a lot of dollars right now that are going towards things that I would classify as modern, right? Things that really are not vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Products. So I do think that there is somewhat of a bubble right now around some of the more modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That's catching tailwinds, right? It's people that just think in their heads that, like, well, it's a Blue Eyes for maximum gold, so it's got to be worth as much as the stuff from the OG sets, that are spending a lot of dollars on stuff that's more modern that just doesn't have as much value for a couple reasons. Number one, it's just less rare, right? If you're out there buying maximum gold and you're sending the maximum gold Blue Eyes and Dark Magician and so on and so forth to PSA, so too are literally thousands of other collectors out there in the market, which means the PSA pop for a PSA 10 Blue Eyes White Dragon from the maximum gold boxes is going to be astronomical. It's going to be huge, right? Relative to the things that we're used to from the older sets, because everybody's caught on that, like, grading cards is like the way to secure the value and all these things. So there is probably a lot of people that are just speculating and, in my opinion, making very risky investments on more modern stuff. The other reason, beyond just the rarity issue, that everybody out there has pack fresh maximum gold stuff, is this issue of the nostalgia power of it, if you will, right? It's like there's a reason that the Mickey Mantles of the world and the Babe Ruth cards and, like, the really old school players, like some of the biggest names from when baseball was, like, just kind of ramping up as a national, televised, like, very high impact cultural activity in the United States. The same can be said for other areas like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or Magic, right? It's not an accident that you see cards like Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician commanding the highest prices. And look, people are going to beat me up about this with all the GX folks and all these other things. Like, sure, like, people that are fans of GX and Zexal and all these other characters that came after, those people still remember that, like, Yugi and Kaiba and all these people, Pegasus, those were like the first. That's where it started in, like, 2002. So that's partly why I think this stuff commands higher prices and is to a degree less risky than the more modern products, which I think are driving up a lot of the bubble-like feeling that we have is coming from unlimited, graded unlimited. It's coming from graded modern stuff. It's coming from, like, all these dollars that are getting funneled into things that just, like, any outside observer would say that doesn't pass the sniff test, so to speak, for where you should probably be thinking about spending a lot of money. So I've pretty much given you my opinion that I think there is a bubble out there, but that it's primarily related to the more unlimited, modern, dumb money, if you will, right? And I hate to use that label, but it's sort of like smart money goes after vintage, first edition, PSA 10 preferably, 9 is fine too. That's where smart money goes, right? Because if you look at the PWCC pricing trends, you look at PSA, if you have PSA 10 stuff that's really original from a certain category, those things just generally do tend to appreciate. And I think part of why we're seeing such aggressive appreciation right now is that we're just having a lot of people come into the hobby right now because of the pandemic. We're having a big influx of just more buyers, more attention, and more people just discovering like, oh yeah, I remember that stuff. That was cool. I probably want to get back into this again. So I do think there is some of that that's also driving why we're seeing such a hockey stick curve, if you will, for the level of demand and the pricing in the Yu-Gi-Oh market currently. So it's my opinion that for vintage Yu-Gi-Oh, first edition, especially PSA or Beckett graded, very high graded stuff that's very rare and scarce, those things are not necessarily in a bubble. I think it's more just kind of the natural course of appreciation that has been unexpectedly impacted by a pandemic that has brought an influx of people back into the hobby who I don't think are all just going to get washed out after the COVID situation resolves. I think a lot of people are going to stay with the hobby and stay with the cards. So let me talk through a couple reasons why I don't think the bubble is quite as bad as some people feel that it might be. So first and foremost, in Yu-Gi-Oh, unlike Pokemon, and unlike a lot of other trading card activities, there is a real, true degree of rareness and scarcity to the cards in the raw format. In Yu-Gi-Oh, we have secret rare cards that are extraordinarily difficult to pull, even from a fresh box of cards, right? And we also have, this PSA effect on top of the secret rares and the ultra rares, on top of the production issues of centering quality and all these other things that affected some of the different sets. That if you watch some of my other videos, we have cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that are as scarce or as difficult to grade as the Black Lotus and as, the Mickey Mantle PSA 9s and 10s. We have stuff that is equivalently difficult to find and grade in PSA 10 level quality, which to me says there is a true degree of rareness and scarcity, and that we're not talking about a commodity item that's very easy for people to get. This is very unusual, very hard stuff to find. And I think innate scarcity in the market gives Yu-Gi-Oh a huge advantage over a lot of other trading card areas or other hobbies, just because there are so few of these things available out there, which basically drives down the amount of availability in the market at any given time, which helps to buoy the price strength over time, just because there's less stuff flipping around. It's very hard to find certain cards. So I think that's one thing that helps to hedge Yu-Gi-Oh against some kind of massive sell-off or bubble, is that this stuff is just so infrequent and so hard to find. Number two is I think that there is a real degree of nostalgia power and collectability around Yu-Gi-Oh, very similar to what you have in Pokemon. It's a big media franchise. There was a television series. It was almost ubiquitously popular among a certain demographic of kids in the early 2000s. And so it's something everybody knows. It's something everybody remembers. And that kind of connectivity and that kind of ubiquity, if you will, or commonness of the shared understanding of what this stuff was, is similar to baseball to a degree in my mind. It's like everybody knew who Mickey Mantle was. Everybody knew who Babe Ruth was. Everybody knows who Michael Jordan is, right? And all these other major characters. The same kind of thing is sort of true to a degree when you're thinking about Pokemon and you're thinking about Yu-Gi-Oh specifically. Magic much less, but Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon benefit from this like big media familiarity that a lot of people have with the culture and with the cards. Now, a lot of people like to bring up the Beanie Baby example of bubbles, right? What was different about Beanie Babies is, number one, there was less nostalgia around it. There was less innate collectability because there was no television series that went with it. There was no trading card game associated with it. There was no like activity that you could get involved in related to the Beanie Babies, except literally just collecting them and flipping them. That was the only thing you could do with a Beanie Baby. A Yu-Gi-Oh card, you can play it, you can trade it with your friends, you can watch the show and see how your favorite characters use those cards and how those things evolve over time in the series. there's all sorts of other connective tissue with Yu-Gi-Oh that I feel like drives the value, the true value, like the innate intrinsic value of what the card means and what it says to somebody, instead of a Beanie Baby that's basically just a toy that has no television series. You can't play the toy in the way that you play a trading card. And there's just all sorts of other things that I feel like make the Beanie Baby bubble a lot different and not analogous to what we're seeing in Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. So 2 other points. Willingness to pay is very strong in the Yu-Gi-Oh market right now. And that's not an accident. What's happening is you're seeing a lot of people who are now in their later 20s, in some cases, or early 30s, who are becoming higher income, right? They're further along in their careers. They have a lot more expendable income that they can use on hobbies and things like this. And I think for a lot of folks, when you look at the personas of people that were serious about Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day, it's not like the persona of people that were really serious players, really serious collectors. That's the kind of stuff that sticks with you. It doesn't change over time. It's like if you're a big sports fan, if you're a big baseball fan, that doesn't leave you, right? There's a whole community around baseball. There's like a whole thing with it. You teach your kids how to play baseball. There's like all this stuff that goes into it that is very similar to a trading card game or activity like Yu-Gi-Oh, that again has this stickiness to it, this like just like a cultural staying power that you have with something like a sport or a trading card game or a highly nostalgic television series that people grew up with, right? So I'll leave it there, but there's a willingness to pay that is growing among the buying community, and I don't expect that willingness to pay to contract very much over the next several years. People only just generally, people become higher and higher income as they age, and sure, there might be different things that people spend on over the course of their lifetime, but for people who, you know, are really interested in Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't expect that the willingness to pay is going to change dramatically over the next 10 years. So we talked about willingness to pay. The other piece here is willingness to sell, which right now is actually pretty low when you talk about first edition Gem Mint 10 or Mint 9 quality cards. Go on eBay right now, pick a random set, and try to find one of the secrets or one of the ultra rares or even the super rares in PSA 10 on eBay right now. You're not going to find a lot. There's just not a lot of stuff that people are willing to part with right now. And some of it's registry set driven, right? People that are trying to collect an entire set with PSA. We've got that tailwind that's helping us. You've also got people that just like the cards. Like, for example, I have 3 copies of Garnicia Elephantis on the wall behind me. Those aren't going to get sold anytime soon, right? It's an art piece that I want to have in my home. I'm not going to sell that. And a lot of the people that have cards have the exact same mindset. You can hear this. People that have like first edition LOB copies of Blue Eyes White Dragon, they're like, yeah, I have 1 copy of this thing. I'm never going to sell it. I own whatever it is, $100,000, $85,000 card. I have no interest in selling that. It's like a status symbol. It's like having a Lamborghini or like some kind of fancy car. It's like just something that you don't want to part with. It's a fun thing to have that for a lot of people they're not going to get rid of. So I feel like the willingness to pay piece on top of the willingness to sell piece together create a recipe for a non-bubble scenario. It's sort of like, in my opinion, just sort of the general course of appreciation of a scarce resource, which is what we're seeing in the market right now. Hey, the last thing I'm going to just say here is that the liquidity is also pretty low, and this goes to like the willingness to pay, willingness to sell stuff I was just talking about, but like there will not be a moment where every person that owns the Gem Mint 10 first edition Garnicia Elephantis that I have behind me. There's a pop of about 65 of those in the world, and it's not like all 60 of those are just suddenly going to hit the market at once. If anything, there's going to be 1 or 2 on eBay. So the last point that makes me confident that we're not in the middle of a bubble is sort of this combined effect, kind of this weird effect, and I don't really know what to call this, but it's something between like a Snob effect, a Giffen Good effect, or a Veblen Good sort of effect. You can Google all this stuff. But there's something happening in the market where, take Steve Aoki, for example, who just bought that very expensive Blue Eyes White Dragon, and several other different cards. If you're the kind of person that spends $25,000 $100,000 on a collectible card, a trading card, odds are very likely that you have a lot of disposable income. You don't have to sell that card at all, right? You just dumped a whole bunch of money on something. There's no immediate need for you to sell it or flip it, which in turn creates sort of this snob effect, or this, I'm searching for the right term, but basically what it is for people that have the resources to pay very high dollars for these cards, they have absolutely no reason to sell them at any price but a gain. Which is to say, okay, you want a first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon? You can have it, but you're going to have to pay more than what I paid for it. And because there's so few of them out there in the market, and because all the people that own them are very wealthy for the most part, then nothing happens but upward movement of the price. And you see the same effect kind of happen in like rare instruments. You look at rare violins, or like rare automobiles, or all these other things that are like such an expensive asset class that the only thing that happens in them generally is appreciation, unless you have a couple of the one-off people that own that stuff that have that feel they need to sell it beneath what they purchased it for. So I didn't do the best job in the world articulating this, but all the things that I talked about in this video create a recipe that in my mind is a market that is going to be far less bubble-like than Beanie Babies or some of these other things that people like to talk to in history, that had very different circumstances, very different value drivers, and very different stickiness with respect to their place in cultural collective memory of the people that are interested in that given asset class. So that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was not a formal presentation by any means. I have some other videos on my channel that you should check out that get a bit more into the details on market watches and all that sort of stuff. So if you like this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Once again, the Parkside Merchant. We'll see you next time.